Good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I'm on the business operations team of Formula Trinity Autonomous. We're a student-run organisation with two projects. We have the internal combustion project, which design and build and race a car in Formula student competition. And then this event is for the autonomous team. We're currently running our AI April campaign to promote the team. And yeah, so tonight we are joined by Barry Lunn, founder and CEO of Provizio, Allan Beechinor, CEO and co-founder of Altada, and Dalton, CEO and co-founder of Robotify. So just a bit about ourselves. The aim of Formula Trinity Autonomous at the moment is to host and compete our own autonomous racing competition. And that's what we're currently working on. We're all very interested in autonomous vehicles, AI, and robotics in general. So tonight myself and Dan and Tim will be discussing all these. And if you have any questions, you can either pop them in the chat or you can put your hand up and I can unmute you so you can ask them. So I'll just hand you over to my co-hosts, Tim and Dan now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first AI April panel talk. My name is Dan. I am the lead of the control team with Formula Trinity Autonomous. I'm a fourth year computer and electronics student and currently living in Limerick. My co-host tonight is the great Timothy Farley. Do you want to introduce yourself, Tim?
Yeah. Hi guys, I'm Tim. I'm a second year undergrad at Trinity studying engineering. I'm also co-founder of Field of Vision, and we're part of Alcessor, Trinity's AI startup, which we'll be talking plenty about later.
Perfect. So get straight into it. We're going to just hear a little bit about our great panelists tonight. I don't know if anybody wants to start. Maybe Barry, if you want to say a bit about yourself and a little bit about the company. If we're taking you by shock here.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for coming along. Yeah, so just a bit about myself. My name's Barry Lunn. Yeah, I founded Provizio there about 18 months ago, and we're building accident prevention technology. So taking a slightly different approach to autonomy, and it probably comes from, without going into too long, I was working on, in my previous company, Aralis, we were working on probably the leading autonomous platform in the world. It probably still is. It's not the one you hear most about, but it's a hell of a way ahead of the one you hear most about. And we were building sensors and software for that. And I suppose within that, identified that the industry was a long way off full autonomy, and everyone was kind of taking the wrong approach, was the way I looked at it. Like in aero defense, which is my background, you start with the hard problem and you work back. So you don't go to NASA and tell them you have a technology that won't work in space, but you'd still like to build a shuttle. And essentially that's what the autonomous industry had done. It started with Hello World and then said, let's drive around in circles, and then let's drive around in circles in Arizona in the perfect environment. So to me, the whole level 0 to level 5 autonomy was a load of nonsense. So we just started focusing on the edge cases. So that's what we set up Provizio to do, was to solve the hard bit and work back and build it as an augmented platform, and build it where the human is one of the key trainers of the system, rather than working the other way around. So that, and focusing around the reasons we crash. Why is 1.35 million people killed every year? And that gave us both a meaning, I suppose, but it also gave us a complex enough problem that we thought would be interesting enough. So that's kind of the background to Provizio and how we got started.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, very, very nice. Adam, maybe, do you want to go next?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's nice to be here, everyone. My name is Allan Dalton. I'm the CEO of a company called Robotify. Slightly different to the lads, we're kind of focused on the education sector primarily. And so our business isn't as much about AI, but more so building the tools to be able to get there eventually in your career. So Robotify was founded. We started a company in secondary school here in North Dublin. Myself and my business partner, Evan Darcy, and we started teaching kids in our local school how to code robots. And what we found when we were teaching kids about robotics was that the learning efficacy and the engagement in the classroom just went through the roof compared to teaching kids about traditional technologies like HTML and CSS. And so over the years, we realized there was a few problems with the robotics industry, primarily, especially in education. Cost of access is a huge problem, accessibility in general, so literally having to be on site, and then the efficiency of those tools in a classroom. So we've built basically over the years a variety of different technologies to help enable people to access robotics technology more at scale. And we essentially landed in the area of simulation. We've decided to, well, I suppose, take on the challenge of building an in-browser simulation engine, which has been a very difficult challenge. But we now have the world's leading in-browser physics engine, which is about 3 times better than any nearest competitor. So now we're able to build, incredible virtualizations of different robotics in a browser for the purposes of widespread training. So for students that have devices which like Chromebooks, tablets, mobiles, we can now give access to high fidelity simulations of different robots. We're currently applying it in kids education space. So we've got a platform called Robotify Edu that teaches kids all about coding using block-based programming, Python and JavaScript. And something which you guys said earlier on the call, we've just released a huge update. It was late last year. We added full peer-to-peer multiplayer support to our physics engine, which essentially means that 2 people in different areas of the world can see each other's robots in real time, multiplayer, which has allowed us to go after the robotics competition market. And we just came off the world's first virtual robotics tournament using our multiplayer software to enable kids to control drones on Mars. It was a sponsorship by NASA. And these high school kids in the States were using Python to control virtual drones in our web-based platform. So over the years, we're hoping to be able to expand and be able to look at more industry-level applications. We do work with the likes of the European Space Agency at the moment and looking at how we bring industry-level stuff in. And I suppose just a bit of an imposter with regards to the AI on this panel, more so kind of looking at the education piece and how we relate that to the I suppose early versions of all of you guys on the call, you guys as kids, and how do we bring more and more students at a level where they can go and work for companies like Altada and Provizio. So really excited to be able to be here today to try and shed a bit of light on that part of the equation.
Amazing, yeah, unreal. Because especially like not a lot of people here might be AI specialists, so it'd be good to like give them how they can get into it. So on to Allan. I'd love to hear what you're up to and a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, thanks for having me, by the way. So Allan Beechinor, CEO and co-founder of Altada, also the co-founder of Altada, which is I guess it's one of the first dedicated AI accelerators in Ireland with Trinity College and Tangent. Also co-founder of a privacy company, Beacon AI, and fashion company, which is AI for retail, Alana. So basically, we're in Altada, I guess, is our core focus, which has a team of 50, and we are 95% AI architects, machine learning engineers, data scientists, and we've created a platform that is disrupting financial services. So fintech, I guess, is the description. So we work closely with larger asset management companies in the US. So as it stands today, our platform has already ingested 27 million loan files on behalf of the likes of Wells Fargo, Rocktop Partners, BlackRock, which is a value of about 3.1 billion. And within that platform, we essentially replace the kind of draconic process of auditing for legal files and non-performing loan files before they become delinquent. So ultimately, it's a $6.7 trillion business in the US. We've gone through rapid growth in that sector. We've also created a solution for multifamily and single tenancy acquisitions in the US, which again is a substantial market. We've already created kind of a delta between alpha, which is normally being used by companies to purchase assets post and pre-COVID, right? Our other side of the business, we have a biotechnology arm, which was previously used for smart cities for privacy by design, and now we've deployed a solution to assist stadiums get back to the new normal, as they call it. So we're deploying our solution to Bowls Football Club in 2 weeks' time. We've executed a contract with one of the largest airports in the US, and basically it's a technology that ensures that you don't have symptoms of COVID, you're wearing a mask, social distancing, but also our algorithms, our models are created to scale out. So we do detect, patterns that will be associated with people of interest, human trafficking, baggage theft, object detection, and prevention of crime within airports, which would be, transportation of dangerous devices. We just executed a contract, a JV, with one of the larger security firms in the US that deal with all of the major sporting stadiums, all the major airports and police force, for our technology to be embedded with their technology, which is for, again, addressing the kind of the risks associated with, criminality increase post-COVID is how they're articulating it. Okay. Separately, I work very closely with the Irish ecosystem in terms of, I sit on the board of the CRT AI for PhD level, which is on the board of UCC for SFI. Also work closely with the National AI Strategy, co-wrote the first National Masters in AI for UL, and have been heavily involved in creation of the foundations level of data science for the academic framework. But I guess on a kind of a commercial level, the stuff that we're looking to do in the next, let's say, 12 to 16 months is I'd address the kind of growing concern within financial services that they're not quite sure where the market's going to land or arrive to. So we're working heavily with most of the major custodians in the US in terms of identifying, is it going to be a bull market, bear market? So we've got an analytic engine that runs across all of the different media feeds. So we're able to ingest market feeds, market analysis of change in patterns, and a change in spending power. This algorithm actually was used previously. We kind of have another arm that we work closely, let's call it a CSR, as it were. So we do a lot of stuff on behalf of WHO and UN, so very much around that ethical hacking level. So we have worked on projects, anything ranging from tracking people of interest to sharing of fake news in relation to breast milk substitute in relation to COVID-19, stuff like that. So we do that from we do two CSR projects a year with WHO. So that's a broad summary.
Yeah, congrats on the new.
I'm going to leave now. Yeah, I'm out. Jesus.
Actually, you were saying you were doing something with Bose. We just actually, a bit of a passion project of ours. We're making an investment for the future, so we just sponsored a pitch side stand at Bose. So when our office is just down in Glasnevin, so whenever we get back to normality, I think it would be a good Friday night thing for our staff to be able to go down to the Grave Diggers for a lovely pint of Guinness and then into the Bose match afterwards. So good to know your technology be tracking us in there at least.
No, we're safety, Adam. So we'll turn it off that evening to make sure that you can enjoy the few beers, right?
Good man, appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's on the 20th. So it's just essentially for safety measurements, right?
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, best of luck with the Bose implementation. Sounds really cool. So yeah, you guys you all have such just disruptive and innovative companies. But you had to start somewhere. So I was wondering, could you tell us about what kind of support you had on your journey, or what kind of support that you think was impactful on helping you kind of just get to where you are? Maybe Barry, if you want to start off.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah. The problem is when you get to my age, there's a lot of different supports that you have to call on over the years. Is it the teacher that caught me doing graffiti that didn't bring me to the principal but brought me to the art teacher, and that changed the trajectory of my life to all the way through. But yeah, in terms of, I suppose, starting companies and building companies, and I definitely echo Adam's thing where I'm definitely an imposter on the AI side of things. I've been a hacker all my life, and it's AI today because it helps me to solve a problem. But if something else works better, I'll always use that. That kind of way. I've always kind of taken that approach. I suppose out of college, I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. You know what I mean? I come from Limerick, and I come from an area where you didn't really talk about being an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? It wasn't. It was like it was. But I've discovered since that it's just illegal criminality, so it's all good. But so I met a couple of entrepreneurs back then when I finished college, and I learned the ropes from them. Learned an awful lot from them. They'd been there and done it before. There weren't too many companies in the 80s that were spin outs from the University of Limerick, started by two lecturers that went on to raise venture capital money from France and sell, to a Swiss multinational. This was mental stuff for me. So I met them, moved off to France with them, worked a lot in Russia, and that like you can't like I'd worked. By the way, I learned more working in shops than I ever learned, from any course or any online thing about selling or anything else. You know what I mean? Working with the public, that type of thing. And then joined those lads anew and just sponged off of them for years. You know what I mean? And then eventually, ended up CEO of that company, and then did a couple of spin outs, but then really wanted to do my own thing. So I set up Oralis, which was my previous company. And that was just that it was a screaming problem that needed to be solved. And really did the real startup thing, raised a seed round from a couple of venture capital companies in Ireland and Enterprise Ireland and all that fun stuff, and then moved to America and did that whole thing. We're going to take over the world, and then ended up selling that on our 3rd anniversary. So that was an interesting one as well. It was like the most accelerated, doing everything you could do in a company in kind of 3 years, that kind of way. But I probably learned an awful lot about myself as well in that process, and what gets me going and what all that fun stuff. So I think when I was going again and going with Provizio, it was very much something that would have maybe more meaning. And it's quite a trite thing to say for a fella from Limerick, but anyway, that's what it was, and that's really what where this came from. And to be fair, like even with the idea and that whole thing, it was, back of the envelope, the usual thing of, I actually think we could solve road crashes that was really it. And having built something and seen the industry kind of, as I saw it, going completely in the wrong way, I just couldn't help myself. But then the most important thing I did was I went to fellas way smarter than me. And that's something I've always done, is worked with really smart people and hoped that they would tell me I was talking through my ass. But actually, pretty much everyone I pitched it to were people I formerly worked with. So a bunch of Carnegie Mellon robotics guys that I really respected, that had built GM Super Cruise and that we'd worked together on something together. And a bunch of lads like ex-Queen's University radar specialists that I built a bunch of companies with over the years. And they all quit their jobs and came and joined. So it was a weird experience where I really wanted them to tell me it was a dumb idea and don't do it again, you idiot. But they didn't, and here we are. You know what I mean, doing it. And it was one of those things of like, it's like if you tomorrow thought you had the vaccine for coronavirus, it's a very hard thing to sit on. Whether the reality distortion field doesn't really matter. You believe it, right? So I believe that. I believe we could have 0 road crashes. Genuinely believe it. And I believe like autonomy is just a slightly interesting bit off the edge of that. But like, imagine solving the longest running global pandemic in human history. That to me is an awful lot more interesting. So that's really the kind of the background and the scope and all of, and that's the big thing for me. Surrounding myself with like way smarter fellas than me, they're the guys you should really be asking to come to these things.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I love your guys' mission, by the way. It's just such a great problem to work on. So Adam, could you talk about like what support you've had? I think you went straight into Robotify just out of DCU, so kind of what support was the most impactful in your journey?
Yeah, well, look, to be honest with you, we started Robotify, we started in secondary school. We were doing our leaving cert like the week before the leaving cert. We were literally walking around like gobshites, handing around flyers to different schools in the area, because we were running a summer camp that summer after leaving cert. Probably should have been focusing on studying to get into college. I think from our perspective, it kind of diverged after we got into college. Evan did mechatronic engineering in DCU. I decided to do business degree. And when we started the company, Evan was working in a sweet shop and had never written a line of code in his life, and I was the coder. So we kind of shifted over time. When we got into DCU, we started kind of veering apart. Mechatronic engineering is an absolute bollocks of a degree in terms of timetable, and it can be difficult. And then obviously people go their separate ways. And so for a business that had literally had no funding, we were bootstrapping everything. We were paying for everything out of our back pockets, trying to figure out a way to do robotics in a scalable way. It was kind of a difficult thing. So I remember DCU were spouting a load of stuff at the time around being College of Entrepreneurship and promoting business owners. And so I suppose I said to myself, look, I've been here for a couple of months, and decided to send a lecturer of mine an email. And a woman by the name of Roisin Lyons, she's an incredible woman, actually going to be starting, I think, working on that UL program that I think the lads were talking about earlier on. And Roisin is a lecturer in entrepreneurship at DCU. And within about, I'd say, so I sent the email being a bit cheeky, saying like, what can you do for us? Basically just tongue in cheek. We've seen nothing, and we'd love to get some help. Obvious. Within a day, we had been brought down to DCU Alpha, which is their IoT hardware campus, their innovation campus down the road from DCU. We had our own free office space where we had that for 2.5 years until we started making some money, and the support of the entire DCU Alpha network and the IoT network there. Really, that got us to the point where we realized that we never want to be a hardware company, and that's never going to be something that we want to do, consumer electronics. And then over the years, like, we've gotten a huge amount of assistance. So it really kickstarted there. It was a lot of kind of stuff off our own backs, but using the DCU network, we met people. Certainly met some what I'd call shite bags who genuinely were evangelists but never actually brought anything. And there's a lot of evangelists out there in Ireland, especially if you're a young entrepreneur or a young engineer trying to make something. And eventually you kind of get to the good guys, and you get your own thick skin, because you kind of have to have that, and then you get help from good people. I remember a meeting we had with Pat McDonough, who was a ex-River Deep. He was an absolute legend. They sold e-learning software in the 80s and in the States, and he was telling us how he used to sell literal floppy disks for 50 grand a pop, like, and there'd be nothing on them, and they scaled a multi-million-dollar business out of that, and people along the way just willing to give you some time just to grab their ear. And oftentimes we hadn't a clue what we were doing, and in many ways I still think we don't at times, but just got some great help along the way. We've been able to use that to meet some great people. We've got some really good angel investors. I think we're very young, so I'm 22 and Evan is just gone 23 there, and obviously we feel obviously we're young, but we also feel really, really experienced, and kind of, I think, doing it for 6-7 years now, being part of our life growing up, and finally understanding and being able to realize our mission. It wouldn't have happened without people like Ray Nolan, for example, who's an angel investor, or Brian Caulfield, who's involved in Trinity and is a great guy. David Maloney is an advisor to business, and his son Sean is actually working with us on an ESA project. And you just meet people along the way, and actually, I know COVID's probably not the best example, but just being somewhere, like, I think the value of just being there and being present, just to watch and feel and see other companies around you and meet people, and you will go through your fair share of shite bags, as I say, but you will get there eventually and find the good guys and the good people to work with. And the other thing that for me was pivotal as well, it's like, Evan was in the middle of mechatronic engineering degree, and probably should be saying this to the university audience, but like, he dropped out of his degree after 2 years because the college weren't helping him. The engineering field was so anti-entrepreneurship at the time. He said he's starting a business. He's literally learned more building Robotify than he did in an engineering degree for a couple of years. They weren't willing to work with him in terms of giving him a break on his degree to go and pursue the business. So he dropped out, and he hasn't looked back since. He's one of the most talented engineers I've ever seen. And so I think it's great to see an entrepreneurship-focused engineering society. And from my perspective, as much help as you can get from the entrepreneurs, it's so important. Like, I'm probably speaking to loads of engineers here But, you know, as much as I'm an entrepreneur, like, I think entrepreneurs need engineers and engineers need entrepreneurs as much as possible. So always try and look outside and try and get the help of seasoned entrepreneurs. And yeah, so we've had huge help along the way from great individuals, and we've been lucky, but it always stems from the individual. So we just had to keep pushing until we found the right people.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's great. Universities play a really important role in incubating innovation, I think. So yeah, Allan, do you maybe want to talk about kind of what support you received when you're starting up Altada, and maybe kind of what void you were trying to fill with Assessor, maybe in the AI kind of infrastructure here in Ireland?
Sure, Tim. Adam, I can relate to that. I've met a couple of shite bags along the way myself, right? So the support, Tim, from my perspective, was we met. Let's just call it the drawer of broken dreams, right? So we started off with a vision that we were going to crack data privacy, and you know, this was tail end of 2016, start of 2017. Everybody was GDPR. The world is going to stop. It's Independence Day. Our data protection commissioner is going to blow companies up if they have any breaches, right? So we architected a platform to address that very thing in terms of GDPR, data subject requests. It was a complete disaster in terms of nothing happened, right? Nobody got fines. Nobody was getting into trouble. PII was very relevant, right? And GDPR was being applied, but it was kind of like a moratorium on the issuing of fines, right? And that was our business plan. So that didn't work. So we had to iterate really quickly. That accompanied with broken promises from partners, investors. I started as the CTO, so I'm actually the inventor. I'm the techie, I'm the creator, and 20 years doing AI. And then during that process, we had to restructure the business. So tail end of 2019, we went into a process in Ireland that we referred to as examinership. So we restructured the company, came out the other side. And that's where the support kicked off for us in terms of the company. We always had a good ecosystem and a good goodwill around us. We were fortunate that we kept all of our founding tech team, in terms of the guys that created the IP. So we came back out of November 22nd, 2019 with clean bill of health, quite a number of bids for the company. And my wife was also my co-founder. Niamh joined the company as, she's COO, but she headed up the legal compliance part. We have 4 kids under 12, so it was very important that we were aligned on the business strategy, right? So we stepped out into 2020, got the business, crystallized the messaging, and just went for it, right? So we've raised just under 7 million euros since that into the business. We're heading to Series A start of next year, somewhere between 25 and 50 M raised in terms of where we're at. So we're heading for that kind of hockey stick. So the support we got, I must say, in terms of Ireland, Enterprise Ireland, have been fantastically supportive to us. The universities, the ITs, the ecosystem here, plugging into the talent pool, supporting each other. I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of peers as well. Barry and I spoke earlier about Joe. There's a good bunch of founders in Ireland that they've really got your back, and you find the good guys. So Adam, keep going, man. There's more good guys than bad guys out there. I can tell you now, but there is a couple of guys out there that need to get their butts kicked and get out of the ecosystem. But that's coming, and that leads on to the next part of the question, Tim. Why do we do Assessor? Because of that very point. I'm a techie. We came very close to the wire in terms of commercial guys letting us down. And I want to try and, if I can pass on that experience and that learning to anybody and save them that effort of meeting just bad actors, I'm going to do that. So the difference for us is we partner with the companies. We want to assist them. We're introducing them to the good funding partners. We're very fortunate. We've got, investors in our business that have over $10 billion in terms of asset management. One investor that works with us is he's nicknamed as the kind of Mr. Wall Street or whatever. So we're fortunate we've met those guys along the journey. And I just want to open that up to Irish companies and the Irish ecosystem, because I think we can do a hell of a lot better here in terms of protecting the founders and protecting the companies, and start getting people into the situation where they don't lose the control of the company at early stages. They don't get too diluted, for 50K. I'm not being facetious, but I've seen term sheets, 100K guys, and the founders are going to be in a ratchet 2 months down the stream, if they don't hit their KPIs that are unrealistic to begin with. And then on the other side, I want to help the AI ecosystem, because there is a talent pool of people in Ireland. It's a small talent pool. AI is becoming very important in terms of digital transformation and companies in general in terms of that pivot. So there's going to be a delta between the talent and the skill that's there. We do have, and we're very fortunate. We've got a very strong tech company. We've got a very strong tech team, and we've got more people joining. We're adding 6 data scientists this month alone in terms of the organization. So we're very fortunate. I want to pass that on to other companies. And the other side as well, I want to make sure that the companies we're working with, that when they say they've got AI, they don't drop it, because there's too much people clinging on to the word AI, and then they're trying to get that kind of, credibility. You don't have to do that. You can say, I'm applying AI to some problem. You don't have to be an AI guru or expert or industry or thought leader, right? You just have to be able to apply it to the business. And the business drives the business. The technology is just the enabler. So just getting people into that mindset to back themselves,
Yeah, like as you were saying, the talent pool is amazing in Ireland, but like sometimes they're not getting the supports, and that has been improving lately. Things like Altada are your own thing, startup accelerators for these tech companies. But in terms of in comparison to other countries, what else do you specifically think that Ireland is missing compared to other countries? We'll start off with Allan and get your views on that.
Again, infamously known for being muted in many events, so feel free to, if I get too far right, just to shut me down. Funding ecosystem that is aligned with the founders and the entrepreneurs. Just that's one thing that we're lacking. Just that activity of people that recognize talent before they have revenue generated, and they can work on a demand valuation, right? Looking at the back in the founders. Like, most of our funding has been raised from US, right? And I've sat in meetings here and I've sat in meetings in the US, and the difference you can't even compare in terms of the conversations. It's like you're commended for going large, right? You're commended for North Star, moonshot, right? Over here, it's ratchet down the value, get you down to the minimum in terms of forecasts. That's one cultural change. And the other one is back to Adam's point, proper mentors and guidance, giving back. That's like, just, not be facetious. There's guys in the ecosystem, they mentor companies, they have not done it before. Not that I'm saying that's a differential, but they're given advice based on lack of experience. And it's not malicious, it's just they have not done it before. So just getting the white noise out of the ecosystem and getting the founders to the next stage of scale. And let's get a couple of Irish companies that are able to stay here and scale a business within Ireland and then export in a kind of a systematic manner.
Yeah, and also like as young people, like budding entrepreneurs and stuff, maybe Barry, do you want to give us maybe just some advice for young entrepreneurs that would be looking to kind of break into the scene in AI?
Well, the first advice I give anyone that ever comes to me, a young person that looking for advice on being an entrepreneur, starting a company, I say, don't do it. If you can do absolutely anything else, do fucking something else. You know what I mean? It isn't the crack. You know what I mean? Now, if they come back 3 months later and say there is nothing else in the world I can do, and I have the mental condition, and I do consider entrepreneurship is somewhat a mental health issue. Genuinely, I think it manifests. I see very similar traits in an awful lot of people who go on and do multiple companies, as serial entrepreneurs, as they're called. Like, there is something wrong, right? And actually, I've talked to a lot of people over beers, and it said, if I could give you the blue pill tomorrow and you wouldn't feel like this anymore, would you stop? I'd fucking take the pill in the morning, right? Because it's the thing with entrepreneurs is they're seeing problems all the time, right? I see this like where I go to the pub with my mates, right? And we're having a chat, and I'm looking behind the counter at the whiskey sales and going, hang on a minute, why aren't there enough Irish brands on that thing? And by the end of the night, I have a company started and I'm doing a feasibility study with a bunch of people and trying to solve that problem. So like, and almost if you don't have that manic thing, you won't probably do it. I think after that then, like as the lad said, it's surrounding yourselves with the right people. But that cuts both ways, by the way. So I'm actually comfortable with all the spoofers that are out there. I'm good with that. Like, it's my life's mission to keep good lads away from it. So I'm an angel investor as well. And like I've said to a bunch of the company, I'm the worst angel investor in the world, because I'll always take the entrepreneur side. I'm always on the founder side. I'm like, I had a meeting with, there's a young company here in Limerick, Trackworks, great young lads, and I had a meeting with Chris one day, and he was saying, and he says to me, yeah, but what about the investors? And I said, fuck the investors. And he went, you are the investor. And I was like, yeah, but and you do surround yourself with those kind of people. But it's okay that those people exist, because you know what they're doing? They're keeping the spoofers on the entrepreneurial side busy, and they're all keeping each other busy. And so I'm quite comfortable with those, because there's an awful lot of people that want to play entrepreneurship, right? It's a whole different, like, bring up the word sales and watch the room empty, right? If you don't, no one wants to say they're a salesman, even now, like I would have always said I'm a salesman first, a designer second, and a tech person third, because if no one's going to buy it, and if I can't, put something in front of people that they're prepared to buy, there's no point in building the tech in the first place anyway, you know what I mean? And I think, to be honest, I think that's the key. There are good people out there. Your first test is to find them, right? And, and I think, and it is, Adam, I think it's really tough, early on as well, like, especially when you're younger, because you can get sucked in by that, because there's lads that there's an awful lot of false stories. An awful lot of them are down in Cork for some reason, actually, Alan, but there's an awful lot of that going on. So, like, I think that's it, like, find the good lads. And it's funny, a lot of the good lads, we all have them in common. We all know the same people. Like, David Maloney's one of our angel investors. It's a funny old world. It's the same people. I see the same people. A bunch of companies I'm an angel investor in, it's the same people that I'm sitting across the table from. It's actually quite a small pool. And angel investing is a funny one as well. Like, who's writing checks and who isn't writing checks. And there's an awful lot of people will tell you what you should be writing checks for and what you shouldn't be writing checks for. You kind of have to have something compelling. You have to have something that, and I think in angel investing, for me anyway, it's not so much about an ROI. It's about being there to see the journey, having that place in the front seat, especially in Ireland where it's fairly immature. So I have to buy into what they're doing, their mission, what they're thinking about doing, because sometimes you're just writing the check so that you might be the first check into the new company that they learn from. So I think that kind of sounding like the gurus is like there's an awful lot of people on the peak of Mount Stupid in Ireland, right? The gurus, and you have to be really careful around that. And one of the really quick ways of finding out, because one of the things I'll always say to anyone when I'm giving them advice or whatever is, I was like, listen, if 10 other people tell you this, maybe this could be useful advice. But the other side of it as well is, like, I've never lived their life, I've never built their company, so I don't know, like, I don't have the answers. And very much the more I learn, the less I know, that's for sure. And it really gets highlighted to me. And what I've noticed is the better mentors, like, I have some great people that have adopted as mentors, and I'm sure they'll end up in some institution because of it. But that I identified over the years that are really good men. And the best mentors are always the people that when you ask them for advice, they kind of go, yeah, well, look, here's what worked for me in this situation, or here's something someone else said that, and you know what the gurus always say? They say, well, here's the first 66 pieces of advice I'm going to give you, and now I'm, you know what I mean? And now I'm your mentor, and you have been anointed by the chosen one. So, like, it's actually, and it amazes me because I got caught in some of these things over the years as well, you know what I mean? But it amazes me now how easy it is to spot. But that's easy to say when you're in your 40s, you know what I mean? And you've been around the block.
It's kind of like you've really kind of summed up Irish entrepreneurship there, and briefly. I kind of want to switch the topic over, try to get a bit more towards AI, if that's okay with you. I'm going to start with Adam. When you obviously started your company quite young, you're saying you're 17, and your instinct was to teach other people about robotics. And so first of all, in this chat, a lot of people here probably have not a clue what AI is or anything to do about it. So what made you be like, this is something I want to bring to young people? And then do you have any advice for someone who would actually want to get into AI, even if they feel like they might be a bit too old or they don't have the tech experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what really got us into it was when we saw, so there was this teacher in our school who was it was in his early 60s, and he used to run these after school coding classes to teach students how to make websites. And I was always very imaginative kid, always on the go, probably have ADHD if I was to be diagnosed. And I suppose I like always had no skills at all, no creative skills. Like I was not able to draw, not able to write, I was not able to, sing or learn an instrument, or, was definitely not an artist. So when I found coding, it was like, wow, this is the first time I felt this creative outlet, almost like a palette for my brain to just build things out of nowhere and build things from scratch. And so we used to go to this coding class, and there was three kids used to show up every week out of a school of 600 lads, and I was one of them. And so what inspired me to take that on and try and grow it the following year and try and bring it to more of an audience in my school. And really what drove me was when we did a year of computer science on basically just websites, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and then we brought these kind of found that a lot of the people that were naturally STEM inclined, so kids that were already good at maths and kids that were good at science, were grand and loved the coding of the websites. But it was those kids who weren't naturally inclined towards the STEM subjects. The lads who would have been playing rugby or soccer or football or whatever that was, and that just it was lost on them no matter how easy we tried to make the content. So we decided to do the same thing the following year and bring in an element of robotics. And so we said we'll run the same kind of course, and we'll with similar sample size, 30, 40 kids in the school, except instead of coding a website, the output of their code was a robot. And lesson one straight away, when the students were able to put their robots together and they clicked that run code button and their robot was whizzing around the room, it was just like that. We had them. There was a huge emotional attachment to the fact that they'd done something abstract on a computer and it was real. And so that really motivated us. And I suppose where we grew up here in North Dublin, you wouldn't, there's no such thing as coding. And if you had programming or robotics or AI in our school, you were called all kinds of unsavory names, which I won't certainly say on this call. But it's certainly an image thing, and what we saw is, look, this is not just a local problem. This is a problem globally, and we felt that if we were able to introduce robotics and concepts like AI at a very early age, starting young, that it would get rid of some of these preconceived notions. But it's important to start it with the right technologies, and we felt robotics was the way to do that. Certainly from my perspective, I think there's so much more open source technology out there now that allows people to access AI in fun and engaging ways. I remember when we went through a couple of years of being a hardware company, and we had our own robotics kits, and we had our own, we used to sell our own robots, and then we built IoT controller software. We had a robot farm, and I remember we were working with a Raspberry Pi, and we got a little camera, and we were running OpenCV on it, and we had a facial recognition algorithm running. I'd go as far as saying there's so much hacky stuff out there on the web just to even get the basics of it. And for me, just you don't have to go deep to understand why. For me, and this is probably such a misinformed statement, but for me, a simple if statement is what the basis of a lot of AI, right? So when I'm teaching kids coding and we're teaching very basic concepts, like if and else statements, loops, all these technologies are going in with obviously a huge amount of underlying technology. And so just starting basic, can you buy yourself a Raspberry Pi, get yourself a little camera that plugs into it, and see if you can write an OpenCV script or rob an OpenCV script to, track your face, right? And even, taking it up another level, stuff like, just speaking of David, we met David a couple of years ago, and he's fascinated by the simulation software in terms of the ability that the potential applications we have in computer vision, machine vision. And like those incubators that they run are incredible. Like I know it's obviously pre-COVID, but Movidius were running incubators in DC, in actually where we have an office now in Talent Garden in Glasnevin, and it was using the DJI Tello drone, and it was a hackathon to see if you could program the drone. So I think just starting small, and like oftentimes when I see people, and I'm not too involved on the AI side, it's like people always try to take on these huge projects with no experience in AI. Like, so it is obviously a huge, like an area of that needs expertise and needs people to actually understand that you have to have years of experience under your belt and have built projects before. Because like, you know, you hear people saying, I'm going to solve this problem. Good example, great young lads last week came to me and said, look, they're only in fourth year and they're starting a business, and basically their business, all the power to them is AI generated study plans that are going to change the Leaving Cert, and they're going to take pictures of books and convert that into using natural language processing into study plans. Deadly idea, but would probably require a team of about 50 engineers that have been doing it for 10 years to do. And focus on a subset of the problem is probably the best way to start, and just trying to engage with it in a fun way. Central to our brand is engaging with technology in a fun way, no matter how advanced it is. So just that recommendation of just doing it in a fun way. We just did a simulation. We integrated, for as far as I'm aware, it's the first time we integrated TensorFlow. So one of our engineers hacked TensorFlow.js, and they built a nice little kind of thing that would plug into your camera and be able to recognize shapes and objects. And we ran, we believe it's the first time it's been done, a simulation on it, and tricked the TensorFlow.js algorithm into taking a webcam feed from the simulation view instead of the camera, and it actually worked really well. So, you know, just engaging in competitions and starting with fun little projects that just have no commercial value, rather than saying, you know, look, I'm going to solve all the world's problems right now and work backwards from there. So that'd be my advice.
Absolutely. And I could talk about Robotify, like looking at it, all the games themselves, even for me, who has been coding experience, they just look like good crack as well. Has a really nice environment, and it's like I could talk about it all night, but I'll have to move on. But the next one is Allan, because on your website you talk about you want to focus on keeping AI fair and to get rid of all the biases, the unintended biases that AI usually comes up with. What are the dangers with AI, and how does Altada like prevent those kind of biases from coming up?
Yeah, it's a follow-on from Adam's point, really, isn't it? It's like, you know, you don't go into your GP and ask him to do a lobotomy, right? It's like, you know, you go to your GP for a referral to a neurosurgeon. You know what I mean? So like that's AI. So if you put AI in the hands of somebody that, you know, invariably is one page in a manual ahead of somebody else, or a programmer that doesn't understand what they're creating in terms of the data that they're ingesting or how they're developing a very powerful, intelligent machine, right? It's going to go wrong. That's it. Like, I mean, there's been lots of different test cases. I, you know, do a lot of stuff in part of the kind of MIT chat group, Stanford, whatever, right? But look, ultimately, you know, they've done tests out the wazoo to say, you know, ultimately machine learning will attack, right? If it feels threatened, if it has been created incorrectly, right? So how we kind of set the bars, everything we do is trustworthy AI, ethical AI, and privacy by design. So we always protect the individual's identity by building in mechanisms at the beginning of creation of our own models. All of our stuff, by the way, guys, is all proprietary. We've built all of our platforms, all of our models, all the engines our own. And it's, you know, basically our platform has over 43 man years of creation. So just back to, you know, your point in terms, Adam, of hiring 50 people to build it out. That's exactly what we did, right? Incorrectly or correctly, right? But we did it. And I guess I am an AI architect, so I'm kind of, you know, I was able to build out the mechanisms and bring in a really strong team around us. Like, you know, for example, the lead prof in NYU and NJIT is on our team. One of the head guys based out of France is one of our computer vision guys. So we've got the experience to understand what not to do. So it's knowing enough to know what you don't know. If that makes sense, right? Yeah. I don't think you can eradicate bias in its entirety, right? But all you can do is just build in what's called fairness. You know, that there's a fair, decisive, and deterministic outcome with your AI. that's the way to tackle it, right? But we have to kind of do better, right? You know, in terms of what we're creating, just in terms of how it's deployed. You know, for example, I won't name the companies, but there's a few companies that we've come across. You know, some of the projects that we're taking on right now is replacing some of the AI vendors that just did not do their job. You know, that's, to be frank, right? And, you know, from a certain region, certain district, they're banned off the supplier list now. So one of our clients in particular, who's spent probably 22 million over the last number of years in AI investments, and, you know, they had a phenomenal public breach because the company just decided to use the personal information when they actually didn't even need to do it. So like, even like outside of architecting it incorrectly, they created a risk without even having to create that risk, you know. So that's one of the, and just a kind of a segue. So back to Adam's point earlier, the stuff, for example, we're doing with Bose, right? We redact the image unless you need the image because somebody has COVID. Like, we don't keep the image, we don't track. It's not the person we're looking at. We're looking at the symptom. The person's face, in essence, is irrelevant, right? It's, do they have COVID? Are they wearing a mask? Are they social distancing? Yes or no? And then you're redacting the image, and the image cannot be used for a different purpose. That's it. You know, it's just ethical, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And ethics is also one of the big dangers with artificial intelligence. Obviously, a lot of people talk about. The other one is where I want to go with Barry next. So Provizio is all about safety with autonomous vehicles, trying to save lives essentially. With autonomous vehicles especially, people would tend to be very resistant to adopting that kind of AI into their lives. Is that something you see as like a challenge for the automotive industry as it takes off? And like, how does safety incorporate, I guess?
Yeah, like, I hope so. I hope long may it continue. Long may the suspicion about AI, and I think AI in autonomy is very different to what we're interested in. Like, it's so misused. Jesus, Allan, you must cringe, like, with your knowledge base compared to my little bit about the, you know, the misunderstandings about AI and that whole thing as well. Especially in our industry, especially at the superficial level, there's an awful lot of misunderstanding. This thing of like, well, how will your system decide whether to knock down a lady or whether to take the child out? That like total nonsense. And you know who's at fault? The industry is at fault, because they started talking about, we're going to have autonomous vehicles in the next couple of years, and started talking utter nonsense. So straight away you're going to have to talk about systems level AI. We do no systems level AI. We're building a platform that's about saving lives, right? So we're agnostic in terms of sensors. We're agnostic in terms of the types of software we use to solve that, but it's functional safety, right? So you can't have anything, and you can't have any experimental stuff in there. You go into an OEM, a vehicle manufacturer, and use the word open source, and the shutters come down, the alarms go off, and you know, they'll bury you in the backyard, right? So we have to be very realistic, like, about the application of it. And again, a bit almost like we talked about earlier, because it's such a new space. A big thing for me is actually cutting through all the nonsense, because there is an awful lot of nonsense in here. And so, like, AI for us in terms of a functional safety company is almost the place of last resort. You know what I mean? So we do things in direct detection algorithms. We'll write the direct detection algorithms in our radars and our cameras first. You know what I mean? And then, but then it's, what could the ML or whatever enable? What could that give us? Could we fuse a point cloud here and get something interesting? Could we apply this data to that? You know, that kind of way. But you have to be very careful as well that if something is trained on something, and then that's taken away. Like, systems are modular, and platforms tend to be modular. And I've seen this an awful lot where, you know, especially in this autonomous space, where people will build a solution to drive around a track, back to that old thing that I said at the beginning. But you take any element of that away, and it's non-functioning, right? And that's no good to us, because we live in the reality of shared roads. We live in the reality of OEMs buy things in a certain way. Tier ones buy things in a certain way. So everything has to work on its own as well. And also everything has to have a backup. You know what I mean? So there's an awful lot of nonsense. Like look, call a spade, right? Tesla, Elon coming out last week and saying, yeah, we're not even going to use the radar anymore, because we're going to rely solely on vision. Like, ludicrous stuff. right? Absolute. And the reason is because he said a couple of years ago that he was going to make radar do something with software that the physics were never there to achieve, like just couldn't have been done, right? And so the easy way now is to go, well, I'm not going to tell all those people that they bought a dud. So he says, actually, do you know what? We don't even need it anymore. And I think that's where, like, there's an awful lot here that you have to think about, especially with people like us. What we're doing is we're building an awful lot of that stuff in, like, we're the only safety sensor company in the world that's building in a GPU and VPU on the edge, on the sensor. And the only reason we do that isn't to get investor money or to be, we're in the AI space. It's that gets me the data, that gets me actionable data to prevent crashes 10 times quicker than bringing it back and processing it in the big AI NVIDIA machine, right? 10 times quicker. I'm getting actionable data back off my sensor that I wouldn't get otherwise, right? That's the only reason we do it. And then in time, like, we can build that up and we can build out the machine, but it's very early stage. And I think just the last point before I finish, everything I say sounds like a rant, but it's just the accent, trust me. But the last part of that as well is, like, the ludicrous of our industry, the autonomous industry, saying, right, we're going to take out all the drivers. We don't need them. Like, to me, right, I have a tiny knowledge around AI and all that thing. So you have the potential of millions and millions of people all over the world that could train your system. And you're saying, no, we don't need them. That's ludicrous. I mean, the obvious way to go with this technology is augmented, that you help the human driver. And back to your thing, Daniel, is when will the machine take decisions? When we have the absolute data that shows that in this very edge case scenario, the machine is better at making the decision than the human driver. And when are those scenarios? Like, for example, when you human line of sight, right? There are certain things that sensors can see that humans can't see. And for example, and Doppler. So the exact velocity of every object in a scene, a human is always estimating. So is a camera, by the way. So that you're estimating, you're guessing where something is, right? So if we have a sensor that says, if you overtake here, you're going to get killed, then we'll overtake the steering wheel and stop you from killing yourself. And that's it. It's building up from that. And it's amazing how few people are actually taking that approach to the problem. And to me, the human driver is the ultimate trainer, especially because the human driver is the reason for over 90% of car crashes. So there's an awful lot we can learn from that. You know what I mean? That no machine that you build in a lab is going to do for you.
Yeah. Barry, just a small side note on that. Autopilot was created in 1912. How many airplanes you see going around with no pilots, right? Just putting it in there, right?
Exactly. And there's an awful lot of this stuff going around, you know what I mean? Like we saying, like, humans, you know, we have two eyes, you know, so two cameras should be able to drive a car. Are you joking me? It's like a 20-year phenomenon of median 1.25 million people being killed, 50 million being injured. And that's the bar. And the other one I love is, you know, we don't go around with lasers on our head. Well, maybe if we did, things would be an awful lot better. You know what I mean? But that unfortunately, there's certain people have to create that distortion as well, because otherwise their business model doesn't make any sense. And I think people have to be very careful around that. That a lot of the time, that's the reason for the excitement around AI.
Oh, amazing. Yes, Treve is absolutely nailing the questions there. So thanks very much for sharing your expertise. I think Tim has a few more questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, guys. So just one last question, I guess, really, before we go into the Q&A. Just to go through all of you. So I guess, like, Andrew Ng, the ML OG, he said AI is the new electricity. It's going to disrupt pretty much every industry out there. So I was just wondering, could you guys talk about, like, what changes would you like to see in Ireland in the coming years to help keep up with this change? Maybe like 5 years, where would you like to see us? Adam, maybe if we could start with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I think my perspective would be that for universities, so where these, you know, I suppose the research is actually happening, is to look more to industry and for industries to collaborate more with universities. So, you know, my perspective is that we need more and more programs that get university students that are building these technologies into industry to feel what it's like to have a real life application of their technology, and to step outside for, you know, the academia bubble, if you will, to see, you know, how this might apply in real life. And more that kind of stuff is starting to happen with different incubator programs. But I'd love to see some more kind of industry collaboration with universities, and stuff like, you know, what's happening in UL is a real, absolutely hugely motivating thing to see. Because from my perspective, I get some amazing engineers that come to work for Robotify just out of university, and oftentimes it's the guy who's taught himself, has been there for 4 or 5 years, has been in a couple of different companies, but has no coding qualifications, is actually the better engineer, just because they have more real life experience. And so I think with the talent that we have in our third level courses, I think more industry-led applications and a more industry-led approach to education outside the academia bubble would be where I'd love to see some growth being made, and then knocking down the barriers for people, I suppose, you know, where you hear, I think, you know, every time you use the word AI in a pitch deck, it increases your valuation by 10 million. But I think more and more of that bullshit popping, like, you know, pop the bubble of, you know, remove the mystery from what actually it is. Because as the lads have said, I've learned a huge amount from Barry and Allan today in terms of, you know, we're talking about really ultimately it's a means to an end. Like, it has to be driven by why, not that. And I think at the moment a lot of what's happening in industry and AI is that, but not why. And I think doing it for the right reasons, and applying the technology because it helps you get there is really, you know, something that's pivotal. And I've learned a huge amount from the lads tonight, just in terms of their perspective on AI and how it relates to their industry. It's not that they're doing it because they want to just have AI in their pitch deck or machine learning. It's because they actually need it, and because it's a solution that's going to change people's lives for the good, you know, as we've heard tonight. So yeah, that would be my 2 areas.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'd love to see more AI integrated into the university curriculum rather than everyone have to learn it themselves, which is good too, though. So yeah, Barry, do you have any kind of hopes for Ireland in the coming years?
Yeah, like, look, and I think Allan's will probably be a much better answer again in terms of the educational side with his experience. But for me, like, a bit like the one way to clear a room of budding entrepreneurs is to mention sales. One way to clear a room full of AI engineers is to mention implementation, is what I've noticed. And what have you implemented is a very, and not just at university level, but actually post-university and people working in multinationals around this space, is the lack of implementation of their code and that side of things. And that, you know, when you hear, well, I've solved every problem I ever needed with Python, it can be a bit of a red flag, right? That there's more to this. And I'd love to see more in that, you know, and as Adam says, like, you know, the immersive software engineering, like, you know, we're partners on that, really excited about that. Love to see more of that. Like, and, you know, you have to be careful in there as well that you have the right partners involved, that their motivations are there for the benefit, a bit like the thing of, like, you know, angel investors should be there to benefit entrepreneurs, not venture capitalists. I think very similar, you know, anyone getting involved with immersive engineering courses needs to have the entrepreneurs, not having fellas coming in to solve their problems, or here we have lads that are going to be, you know. So I would like to see more and more of that, I suppose. And then, yeah, cutting away some of the kind of bullshit, but that's okay. Like, it's early days, and that's the way it happens. You know what I mean? And it will thin out. I think it is very hard. Like, geez, I'd love if someone could invent an AI filter to filter CVs. It's very, very difficult to hire in this space, and it's not for lack of applications. You know, it really is. I don't know, do people in this space or that are doing it actually read job specs? It's funny. We've noticed, like, you know, if I get a job application for a DSP engineer he's pretty much a DSP engineer, and similar for a radar front end engineer. Guess what? He'll understand radar front end. This space is, a little bit, Udemy course, and here I am. Entertain me, and I think we could learn an awful lot. Like what I've noticed about the Carnegie Mellon robotics side of things, because we have our lads over there, and like so the graduates there, like they're just way too expensive, right? It's nuts over there because you've got Uber, Argo, Aurora, they're all there and they're all hiring them, right? But by God, them lads, when they're coming out, they have implementation experience. And it's because the partners are plugging in there and they're feeding into it, and so they can come in day one and get to work and add value. So look, that's not an easy thing to build. And I think that a lot of it comes down to us as much as the university side of it. It has to be driven, and fair play to the Collisons, like, they're heavy hitters, so they can do that. But I think it's up to the rest of us now to kind of follow through on that as well, and try and do that.
Yeah, definitely. The implementation or deployment really does have to be the goal of really any AI project. So yeah, Allan, do you want to finish us off before we head into the Q&A?
Cool. Yeah. Good points, Barry. I guess Andrew and NG, I'm a big fan, but computer still needs electricity, right? So I think he's pushing the boundaries of it there. I think it's more in line, more proper to say it's the creation of the round wheel instead of the square wheel, but we won't get into that one, right? What I'd like to see is coding coming in at an earlier age in Ireland, right? In terms of just that complete disconnect between the curriculum that's there now. And I'm speaking from a vantage point in terms of having 4 kids under 12, and I started teaching 2 of them coding during COVID lockdown because I saw the opportunity, right, for remote schooling, which was, I became both teacher, counselor, and mentor during lockdown. So I even pushed myself in terms of the skills I thought I never have. I do have now in terms of, teaching skills. And one thing that it did highlight to me is that the curriculum is just completely off center. It's not aligned at all. So that's one thing. The second thing is just more encouragement. And Adam, back to your earlier point, I can totally relate and empathize to your situation in terms of I was in school and I was the guy that could not understand poetry, right? Or William Shakespeare or any of this, hypothetical stuff. William Butler Yeats Tom would love is a boat, and I'm like, but is he in a boat? Is he not in a boat? And the English teacher screaming at me saying, "Can you get into your head? The boat is not real. It's a metaphor." I said, "Okay, so he's not in the boat." Okay, so I get that, and I was very fortunate that I came across somebody who spotted that I was very mathematical minded, right? So I was doing applied mathematics and applied machine learning from a very early age. I started coding very young myself. Probably wrote my first line of code when I was, 7 or 8 on an Atari, right, messing around, and didn't even know what it meant at that time. So that's kind of just seeing that encouragement, because in Ireland, more than most, we label. If you're not fitting into the box, you're labeled. That's it. That's got to go, right? And the labeling of the pressure to become an entrepreneur is another thing. In terms of it's now seen as that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. It's a career. How do you get in to set up your own business? And I can speak from here also, guys. I've mentored on, SOSV accelerators in Imperial College London. I've mentored on other, and I've been the guy, and Barry, I think you relate to this. I've said to guys, get a job. This is just not for you. Just get, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no shame with it. You're at an early age. You'll come back from it. It's not terminal. Failure isn't terminal, right? Get a job and give yourself a break to come back again when you're a bit maturer. And you understand that this is tough, right? It's tough to start your business. It's tough to sit down at the end of every month, have, the responsibility of 50 people's incomes, responsibility to the business. You're making your shareholders money. You're looking after partners. You're driving the business. You've got to be focused, and this got to be what you want. You got to be passionate about what you're doing as well. So it's not about trying to make a business fit. So I think where we could really do with some kind of advancements is financial training in school, mathematics at an earlier age, and coding, and understanding economics. Get some economics into people from an early age to understand that you back yourself, support yourself. You can bootstrap a business at the beginning, right? If it's something you're really passionate about, but have the kind of financial plan underpinning that. And Barry, I have to laugh at your point, man, because we were a tech-heavy company up to this year, and we've really started pushing out. and I'd say I've had more people tell me different iterations of salesperson terminology, and the binary mind, I just can't process it. What is a global strategic strategist, commercial officer? I'm like, so it's sales, right? And I refreshingly got the pleasure of working with a very old colleague of mine who I know him longer than I don't, Gavin. He's joined us as our head of sales, and he just came in, I'm sales. Hallelujah.
Where have you been on, my leg?
Calls it as it is, and that's it. So, let's get that education in there. But look, there's hope for everybody. I think there's a lot of people listening, and I think more and more entrepreneurs, like everybody here and you guys putting this together, that's going to provide that stimulus, and that transcends, guys. That gets into the, pays it forward, So well done on this, by the way. Fantastic work.
Yeah,
sorry, no, to be, but that thing of labeling them with kids as well, I think it's so important, and it's grand for us, like, or whatever, but coming out. But the amount of times I hear, because I'm involved in coaching as well, and I do a lot of work with schools and stuff like that, but I'm involved in sport and coaching as well. And the amount of times I hear he's not artistic, he's not sporty, he's not. We create that. We absolutely create. Parents create that. They create. He might not enjoy it as much, but he can do it. He can do all the different things, and that labeling thing is, it's a big problem. It'd be great just to tell everyone they can do everything as they come through and work it through with them. And then when they come out, we'll knock the edges off them.
Our life will do it anyway, Barry, right? I'm a soccer coach by default as well, and I that was Anyway, that's another meeting.
We've got a load of questions in the chat here. We won't have time to come to all of them, but the first one here is, what impact has your technology been responsible for so far that you personally are the proudest of? So I'll just ask Adam that first of all.
Yeah, I suppose the main thing for me is that we've reached now, just this year, we reached over 100,000 kids since lockdown using our virtual robotic software. I think there was this one time we went in, and I know if like we've done so much this year with regards to the virtual robotics piece and stuff like that. I think it's really the moments. So, in the early days, you actually get to sit with your customers and be with them, and, as you grow. And there was this time when we didn't have staff, and we didn't have a team, where we were going out into doing research courses ourselves to see the reaction of the kids to the robotics. And we came very close to a brilliant old initiative that Trinity used to fund called Make Shop, which was a hacker space and robotics shop just around the corner from Doyle's Corner, there across the road from Trinity. And we went in and we did a community outreach course in Killinarden in Tala, and it was underfunded kind of course. And we went in, and there was 9 or 10 kids there that had never written a line of code in their life, and can guarantee you they'd never been told that they could either. And lack of confidence. I remember these 2 young lads in specific walked in Celtic jerseys and tracksuits, and with a bag of chips from the local chipper, and came in and what's this code and stuff, what's this? And by the end of the week, those 2 guys are like the most interested and engaged and I suppose thinking about the future in a way that was unbelievable. And there was this young girl, and she kind of said, like, listen, at the end of the week, she's only 11, 12, kind of said, like, look, I've never done anything like this before, but being able to work with robots and be able to do the course has made me consider a career in STEM and want to become an astronaut and a female astronaut. And I suppose just inspiring wonder and awe in kids, because it can get serious. And I'm actually disgraced. I think it's a disgrace that I never mentioned, what I'd like to see. And Allan kind of, thank God said it, is that more of that code learning at younger ages in Ireland, to get rid of the barriers, no matter what gender or no matter what what background you're from, just getting that in the curriculum and having that aligned. And so I've been extremely proud of seeing some of the reactions of the kids, because that's the heartwarming piece at the end of the day. You can look at metrics all you want, and number of active users and, you know, number of schools on the platform and number of kids, but it's the people underneath the numbers and the kids that are actually getting, I suppose, having awe-inspiring moments using our software to be able to have a bit of a dream and to think, Jesus, I could become an astronaut, or I could become a scientist, or I could become an engineer, or I could become a programmer. So just giving that basis and that foundation and inspiring kids, probably the biggest impact I feel we're having.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Myself in school, we were lucky enough to have a robotics class in TY, and it kind of like really sparks that curiosity, you know, when you're younger, that you actually consider you might want to go into these things. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear that too.
Yeah,
Allan.
Adam, I can totally come out. I have 3 daughters, and I was teaching my second eldest coding, and you know, some Neanderthal said to me, "But why would you teach her coding?" I was like, "Okay, right. I'm not even going to go there, man."
And look, I'll have to get you some licenses for Robotify. You can get on and get the kids on there as well.
I'm on that, man. I can tell you. I'm definitely going to look it up after this for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm at the opposite end of the scale. As I wouldn't let my 11-year-old. He'd done coding when we were living in Austria. He'd learned coding or whatever in school, but recently he wanted to do, you know, do some more coding courses, and I said, no, come with a problem that you want to solve, and then we'll come up with a coding course that you're going to do with that. So in fairness, he went off and did his research. He said, I want to be able to build my own worlds in Minecraft. So now he's doing a Java course in that. I think it's a big thing of like getting it into them early. What problem do you look to solve? And I think it helps with coding as well, that you have that focus of, can this solve the problem for me? Because otherwise, who the hell would learn Java, you know?
That's quality, absolutely. Yeah, I started the same, Barry. I made a Minecraft mod. That was my first thing that I did, and learned Java, and it was the last time I touched Java in years. So, yeah, that's
thankfully.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, because some people from our team, from our reinforcement learning, competed in Mineral, which is like for using, like, training an agent to get a diamond in Minecraft. So it just seems to be kind of what, you know, if people can relate to it, it actually makes them interested to learn more and more and actually get involved. So the next question here is, do you think the surge in AI over the past years will lead to lasting changes in technology, or do you think it could lose momentum, face some unforeseen barriers, or make the most out of current tech standards and end up almost as a fad like in the 1980s? So Allan, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Recommend the book, Nick Bostrom, Super Intelligent. So AI's run since 1950, right? And I went through four AI winters. And, you know, I'll plug that Irish Diaspora was one of the founding members, John McCarthy, right? And basically, computation and perception was the issue, right? And fear. And AI is already adopted. It's not a fad. It's in everything you touch every day now, right? So it's not like, you know, we're going to just reverse back from smart devices and get worse with, you know, the stuff that Barry's doing, the stuff that Adam's doing, right? And even yourselves from an autonomous perspective, it's, you know, it's the equivalent to using the airplane analogy to say, let's take autopilot out of the aircraft because we just think it's better. You know, like, it's not heading that way. It's going the opposite, where we just have to manage what we want it for. And it's like everything else, right? You navigate it safely. You use it for efficiency. We wrap a process and guidelines around it, right? You know, we're not going to slow down vehicles. We're not going to slow down life in general. It's going to get more efficient. So, like, it's not comparable to the 1980s. 1980s was, you know, massive global crash. Industry was under pressure. Computation hadn't caught up yet. And it went into an AI winter. That's the fact. But like 1980s, we weren't all carrying smart devices, right? We weren't all dealing with devices on a daily basis. So it's already in part of our existence.
Yeah, interesting. It is just, it's at that point now where it is just so powerful that it can be used anywhere for just about anything. Do you have any thoughts? It's another one of the questions about AI's potential to be used maliciously, like in adversarial attacks, or just what are your thoughts on that? Maybe Barry, it'd probably be particularly applicable to you in self-driving cars. What do you think?
To be honest, it's been applicable to my entire career, and it was a thing of because my background's aero defense, right, and everything has the potential to be misused. And I think that again, I think the industry is a bit of a problem here, as well as anything else, right? But like everything I've pretty much ever made has been dual use. And now I always, you know, when I'd be talking to the Export Authority in Dublin, I always kind of went, you know, your hand, you can, you know, you can build houses, you can change the world with your hands, but you can also punch someone. And it's the same with technology, you know what I mean? And you build in the controls, and you build in, and it's not like AI is just another layer on top of all of that, you know what I mean? A big reason for what I'm doing right now is because I spent so many years in the air defense industry. And I remember one of the stalwarts came over to me one day and he said, "Son, I love what you're doing. Are you going to stop being an angel of death and do something good for society?" And I mean, we weren't doing anything for missiles, but that's where the technology that we've been developing ends up, you know what I mean? So I think, and that, so you could apply that to pretty much anything. And that's the way I see with AI as well. I think there'll be an industry involved in protecting. I think obviously it has that, you know, with the fake news and all that fun stuff, it has, you know, dangerous, but that whole place is dangerous anyway. I think people talk about deep fakes and say, you know, it's really dangerous what could be done on Facebook. Facebook is bloody dangerous. It already is, you know what I mean? This is just a physical manifestation that we see and is visible. I'm always way more comfortable with the bad stuff I can see rather than the bad stuff that's built in under the hood. So that would be my opinion on it, but what do I know?
Yeah. So yeah, no, it is already, well, Facebook is potentially a weapon of mass destruction. Yeah.
I still haven't joined. I think it's a fad, by the way.
It's fading out. It's fading.
Yeah, that's why we're starting autonomous, just to get most out of the end of it. Like just milk it one more time. Do we have any more questions there, Catherine? Maybe I haven't seen them.
I actually have just one more question. I think you pretty much all of you mentioned earlier that when you're starting off, just the importance of like good peers, good mentors, and good guidance. Would you have any advice on just like where to find good mentors, or is it just kind of like a really serendipitous kind of thing? Maybe Adam, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I think there's some really good stuff now, like especially on a localized basis. Like for example, in Dublin, I think the guys in Dogpatch are particularly good, and the fact that the new NDRC accelerator is actually doing things an accelerator should be doing from now on is a good sign, and it's not just, you know, in a period of homeostasis. So I think those, like getting yourself into these places for any open events that they have on, just go to them. I think people, especially in Ireland, are willing to, like, I think very, very willing to just take a LinkedIn message or take a DM on Twitter, or, you know, just ask them for a half an hour of their time to run something by them. And I think even Republic of Work in Cork is just an incredible organization as well. And there's more and more of these like regionalized hubs that are starting to open up. Nice to see it kind of centering around universities as well, which is good. So more and more the likes of obviously UStart program in BCU was one that was run by the Ryan Academy there, really good intentions. And the likes of, I think it's Launchbox in Trinity, is it? That the Society, more and more that kind of stuff. It actually does have some great people there, and you know, as Barry said, like I think the bad people keep the good people busy as well, and on their toes. And I think you can really I think set people apart by asking the right questions. So I'd say just being open and being very open to sharing your idea. Like I've been told a few absolute golden nuggets around, you know, people saying, will you take a meeting with me, but you know, I want your advice, but will you sign an NDA before you meet with me? Like no, absolutely not. Like they don't, first of all, the person you're talking to doesn't care enough or have enough time to do what you're doing. So like be willing to share it as much as you can on a public basis, because everyone has their own thing on the go, that you need to just make it as easy as possible for people to digest what you're looking for. And the genuine thing that really does happen is just like ask for help, you know, ask for advice, you know, don't ever ask for an investment, like, you know, and like that was so true for us in a very unassuming way. We genuinely wanted advice, and it came to us that, you know, look, you guys might need a bit of money to do this, you know, and if it's the right person, then, you know, happy days, and it opens up a huge network. But the ecosystem's small, so once you crack it, if you have enough of you know, a bit of the gift of the gab about you, and a bit of the, you know, willingness to do a tiny bit of research, I think it's easy enough to get in front of the right people and have calls with people, you know. So yeah, I'd always respond to a LinkedIn or an email or a call, or when things go back to normal, have a 20-minute coffee with someone, you know. So I think just matter of going to the places that there is activity, if possible, and if not, attending these kind of events, and then just sending someone a message afterwards, you know.
Lads, you've been absolutely amazing. We're so lucky to have you here with us tonight. Do you have anything you might want to say before we start closing off? I'll break up there.
Suddenly go quiet, you know.
Sorry, yeah, everyone.
Beware of gurus. Beware of gurus.
Yeah.
I was just going to spill out loads of advice, Barry, right? No, that was a great answer.
Don't take advice from someone that wants to give it to you.
There's no free lunch, right?
I think we've covered quite a lot. We've kind of given a lot of people who might not know much about AI, we've kind of given a good insight, like what to expect if you want to get into the industry. We scare a lot of people away from being an entrepreneur, which is great. Great for innovation in Ireland. But yeah, thank you very much. Of course, as behalf of Entrepreneur Trinity, the whole point of this talk is to raise awareness about AI and get engineers excited about this industry and get involved. And there's 3 great companies that are showing the way and showing how we can use AI to improve other people's lives. In a Formula Trinity note, I just want to close off saying, if you want to see more of these kind of talks with some amazing panelists, we're going to be continuing on for the rest of the month. So follow Formula Trinity on Instagram, Twitter. We're also having a competition. We're trying to get people to send in their code and race cars. It's called F1 Tent. We're having that, I think it's on the 30th of May. Adam has a great competition called RoboJules, which we didn't get to go to today, but we're trying to get people as involved in AI as we possibly can. So it'd be great if people want to get involved and message us, follow us on Facebook, or follow us or Instagram, Twitter. Please do. And lads, thank you so much for coming today. It's been great.
Thanks very
Thanks
much.
for having us, guys. Thanks so much.
Well done,
Have a
guys.
great evening. See you guys.
Really enjoyed it.
Thanks
Thanks,
very
lads.
much.
Take care.